Hello guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the new god devil and got mass harem? Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Naruto was awoken later that night by Kurama. "Brat, get up. There's a massive amount of negative energy that just appeared at the church where those angels were held up," said the giant fox. Naruto immediately began tapping into his partner's energy to increase the range of his sensing ability. He promptly began to feel what Kurama had. It was filled with malice, even worse than Kurama used to be, and that was saying something. It was also there with Rainer, who was the only one left in the building. "What the hell is that?" wondered the blonde to himself as he began getting redressed. Before he could leave his hideout, the source of the negative emotions, along with Rainer, vanished. He decided to ponder on it later as he left his base. In mere moments he was standing inside the church, with the clone he had watching the building standing right next to him. "Did you manage to see what happened?" he asked the copy. "No, whatever that was just appeared then disappeared just as fast, and they took Rainer along with them. I had felt her fear rise when whoever that was appeared, so maybe it was that guy that she seemed to be worried about." Naruto could not deny the claim since he remembered how Rainer spoke of this mysterious man. He also couldn't help but feel that this was his fault. He had promised her that he would protect her after all. He just didn't expect such an immediate reaction. It was literally only a few hours ago that he had talked Rainer out of her plan, so the fact that there was a response this quick was actually quite impressive. "Search every inch of this building, turn the whole thing inside out if you have to. Let's see if we can find any type of clue to who took Rainer and where," said Naruto to his clone. His duplicate nodded before they both separated and began looking for any type of clues that they might be able to find. Hopefully there was something here to help them. So the two began scouring all parts of the church. It was almost 3 hours later that Naruto finally decided to give up on his search. "Shit, there's nothing here," he grumbled as his clone nodded in agreement. "So, what are you going to do now?" asked the clone. "There's nothing here that can give me an idea of what happened or where Rainer might have been taken, so I'll have to go and ask Sona if she might know who this mysterious guy is, and that's if this guy is even a fallen." The clone nodded and was about to reply, but before he could, a magic circle appeared in the middle of the room. Naruto was quick to change his appearance back to Tsunade in case it was Rainer and send his clone to hide. Soon Naruto realized that the energy signature didn't match Rainer, but it did match someone who he had sensed in the church during his observations. With this new bit of info, Naruto decided to see if this person knew where Rainer was. The person who exited the portal was a tall and buxom woman who appeared to be in her early 20s. She had long, navy blue hair and brown eyes. Her outfit consisted of a maroon trench coat with a wide collar and matching miniskirt and black high-heeled shoes. The trench coat was wide open at her chest, giving a good view of her waist and cleavage. She also wore a gold chain around her neck and appeared to be wearing a white shirt underneath her coat, but it could only be seen from the bottom. The first words out of the woman's mouth, however, crushed Naruto's hopes of her knowing where Rainer was. "Hey Rainer, it's me Kalawarner. Where the hell are you?" The woman proceeded to look around and search for Rainer before she finally noticed Naruto watching her. She immediately jumped back and took up a defensive stance. "Who the tuck are you?" she asked warily. "I'm an acquaintance of Rainer and I came here to look for clues to find her since someone appeared here earlier and took her." The woman, Kalawarner, just looked at her in suspicion. "Oh really? And how do I know that it wasn't you that did something to her?" she asked. "Because I just went through a lot of problems to get her to change her plans, so why would I waste time doing something to her now?" asked Naruto in an annoyed voice. It was that Kalawarner started taking in the other woman's appearance. Her eyes widened when she finally placed the woman's appearance to the same woman that Rainer had described to her earlier, the one who gave her the choice to either change her plans or die. Now she could see a bit of the logic behind the other woman's words, since Rainer had blatantly stated that she could have killed her if she wanted to. This caused Kalawarner to relax a bit, but she was still on edge. "So what happened to her?" asked Kalawarner while trying to get some idea about what happened to her friend. "I'm not sure. All I know is that someone came here and took her. Someone who she feared greatly." This statement from Naruto caused Kalawarner to gain a confused look. "Who would Rainer fear? The only person that I know her to have any fear of at the moment is you." "I don't know, but during our meeting she mentioned that she was working for someone. She said that this guy was a warmonger and made him sound like a pretty bad guy. Do you have any idea who she might have been talking about?" asked Naruto. Kalawarner gained a contemplative look for a second before her eyes widened. "There's only one person that I can think of on the top of my head, and I don't think that Rainer is stupid enough to work with him. At least I hope not." "And who might this person be? How dangerous are they?" "His name is Kakabiel, and he's one of the leaders of the Grigori. He's also one of the strongest fallen angels in existence and has a serious thirst for war. I don't know much more than that, since he's not someone to be associated with easily. Naruto took in all of the details he had been given and sighed. Is there any chance that Reiner is still alive, based on what you know of this Kakabiel guy? I'm not sure, but it is possible. If Kakabiel wanted her dead, then he would have killed her the moment he arrived. Instead he took her, which means he might have some use for her. What that use is I can't say. And do you think that you can find him, or do you know anywhere he might be? Kalawarner bit her lower lip as she began to think. After a minute she shook her head in the negative as she replied. No, I can't say that there is. I would think that he might have taken her back to the underworld, but that's just a speculation. For all we know they can very well still be in this dimension, somewhere on Earth. Naruto silently cursed at this. All these other dimensions was making this an even harder task. He was really beginning to hate his clone for getting him mixed up in all of this bullshit, but knew he would have done the same regardless. Alright, here's what we'll do. You're going to have to keep an eye out for any signs or word of Reiner in the underworld, and I'm going to look around on Earth. If you find her then just return here to the church and let me know. And how would you get in contact with me if you find her? Asked Kalawarner a bit curiously. I'm not sure, since I've never really had to contact an angel before. The sigh that Kalawarner released at this statement was filled with annoyance. Okay, how about this? I'll come back in 2 days whether I've found anything or not. That way we can both come together and compare our findings. I'll be back before that if I do find anything though. Naruto thought about it before nodding. That sounded like a good plan since he really didn't have any way to contact the woman, and 2 days was a long time for someone in Reiner's position. If they didn't find anything in that amount of time then Reiner could very well be dead. Fine, we'll meet back here in 2 days. Don't worry about coming to find me, I'll know when you reach. Alright then. I'll also get some of the others to help me search for any clues in the underworld. That should make things a bit easier. Said Kalawarner. Naruto just nodded in agreement since he would be doing the same thing, just with clones. Alright then, it's settled. We'll meet back here on Saturday and compare notes. Until then we try our best to find any clues about Reiner. The two nodded as they came to an agreement. Naruto then turned around and began to walk away before he was stopped by Kalawarner. Hey, what's your name? Asked the fallen. Naruto stopped and considered if he should give her a name, but decided against it. That's not important right now. He said as he just continued to walk away. What a bitch. Whispered Kalawarner under her breath as she disappeared in the same way that she had appeared, by using a magic circle to go back to the underworld. She would have to inform the others of the situation so they could begin their search immediately. Back with Naruto he was now standing outside the abandoned church. He took a quick minute to make sure that nobody was around before he performed of his signature jutsu. Shadow clone jutsu. Was the silent whisper. Immediately he was surrounded by about 100 clones. Alright, you all know why you're here. Your mission is to scour the planet for any sign of Reiner. Sage mode and Kurama's chakra are permitted, but don't activate any cloaks. We still need to keep a low profile. And what do we do if we find her? Asked one of the clones. Naruto thought about it for a few seconds before he replied. If she's alive and in danger, save her and take out her captors, especially if it's this Kakabiel guy. If she's dead then retrieve her body so it can be given to her friends for a proper burial. The clones all nodded at these new instructions. Also remember to keep a low profile, so transformations are to be used if you're going to be around people, since I don't want anyone knowing about me. Finished the real Naruto. With those final words, Naruto gave a wave of his hand, which was the signal as every clone took off in random directions and blurs. Naruto sighed at this since he was risking exposure, but he couldn't just abandon Reiner. You do know that this whole thing could very well come back to bite you in the ass, right? Asked Kurama, to which Naruto just gave a nod. Yeah, I do. That doesn't mean that I'm just going to leave her to whatever fate that bastard might have for her. If I am exposed because of this, then I'll handle it. Fine, and I'll be there to help since I'm sure that you'll need it. Thanks, partner. It's good to know that I have someone I can trust watching my back. Said Naruto. Kurama didn't respond, but Naruto knew that the fox was in agreement with him. Seeing that there was nothing else that could be done on his part, Naruto decided to return home to get some more sleep. Tomorrow was Friday, so he wondered if he should take the day off from studying or not. He decided against it since he would need something to keep his mind occupied in the coming days, so he would go to his study session. He would also need to get in some training soon with his magic, so he would find a nice place to do that. But that Naruto took off at a casual pace back towards his home. He knew he wasn't being watched and it was too early for a lot of people to be up, so no one would see him. I really am getting too deep into all of this. Thought Naruto as he headed home. The next day Naruto found himself once more in the student council room. He had been studying the new book that Momo had translated, but he constantly found his mind wandering. The reason for this was because some of his clones were beginning to dispel. They had already searched most of the planet in the few hours since they had been made, but there was still nothing on the missing fallen angel. Some of his clones had even used his earth release to go deeper in the ground, in case they were deep enough below the surface to be out of range of his sensing. They had still found nothing. His clones did have quite a few run-ins though, from devils to fallen to even things that Naruto didn't know what they were. In the past few hours he had seen more of this world, the supernatural side included, than he had in the months since he'd came here. He had been trying to keep a low profile, and something that he could use to get back home was already here, so he had no real reason to explore this world. He took in their technology for the most part, but that was it. Now he actually regretted not exploring this world more a bit. There was actually quite a few beautiful sights and architectures to be seen. With another sigh, something that he had been doing a lot of, he rested his book down. This immediately caught the attention of Sona, who had noticed that he seemed distracted. "You seem quite distracted today. Is everything okay?" she asked. If she could help Naruto with whatever was bothering him then she would. "It's nothing, my mind is just all over the place. I just need to get up and do something to clear my head," said Naruto as he stood up. "Will you still be up for our lessons tomorrow?" asked Sona. She really hoped that he would be, but she would reschedule if she had to. "Don't worry, I can still come. You've kept up your part of our deal, and I gave my word that I'd let you teach me about devils when we made our deal. I just need to find something to do to clear my head." Sona just nodded at this. "Alright, but if you need anything then don't be afraid to ask," said the bespectacled girl as Naruto left the room. "Do you think that he's really okay? I've never seen him acting like that," said Momo, who was also a bit worried. Something was clearly on Naruto's mind, but of course he wouldn't tell them what it was. Meanwhile Naruto was walking down the halls of the school. It was lunchtime right now, so there were a lot of students around. "I need something to clear my head," thought the blonde. "How about you find a nice spot to meditate and come in here? I'll kick your ass to get your mind off of everything," said Kurama. Naruto was about to give a sarcastic reply before he actually thought about it. "You know what, that's a great idea," thought Naruto, since that was something that could help him and also something he hadn't done in a while, the fighting Kurama part, not getting his ass kicked by him. Now where to go? He wondered silently. He could have gone back home, but he didn't feel like going all the way back there right now. Then he remembered one place that he might be able to get some privacy, the school roof. It was always locked and students weren't allowed up there, which made it a good spot for meditation. He could also enjoy fresh air instead of the stuff he set back at the cave, since he was underground. With his mind made up, Naruto made his way towards the roof. Since school was still and he had to go the normal route, meaning he had to take the stairs. While he was sure that only the devils would be able to see him moving, he didn't want to risk it. So instead he made his way through the hallways until he reached the stairs that led to the roof. He quickly went up them until he reached the door to the roof, which was locked. Naruto made sure that nobody was around before he began molding a bit of chakra. Instantly sand appeared in head palm, which he then sent into the lock. After the sand took the appropriate form, Naruto twisted it. The click sound of the door being unlocked was soon heard. Naruto pushed the door open and quickly stepped through, before closing and locking it back behind him. He also made sure to remove the sand from the lock as well. He really loved the magnet release. While he could have picked the lock, the magnet release just made it so much easier. Naruto quickly took a seat on a shaded part of the roof and began meditating. It didn't take him long before he was standing before the giant form of Kurama. "Good, you're here. I finally get to do something," said Kurama, who had only really been used for helping Naruto's senses in the past few months. He was glad that he could let off some steam. "Yeah. Now, let's get wild," said Naruto with a feral grin, one that Kurama matched easily. Kurama attacked first, using one of his massive hands to try and crush Naruto with. Luckily Naruto was quite fast. He immediately blurred, appearing to the left of Kurama. He immediately rushed forward for an attack. Kurama, seeing the blonde approaching, prepared another attack. He sucked in a huge breath before releasing a huge torrent of flames at Naruto. The aforementioned human didn't panic, though. He simply slapped his palms together, as one would when praying, before a tsunami of water formed around him. He immediately sent the water to meet the flames. The result was a large cloud of steam forming. Kurama made sure to keep aware as he waited for Naruto to exit the steam cloud. He was about to blast the whole thing away, but at that moment Naruto came charging out. He quickly rushed the fox, who reared his hand back for a punch. He immediately let his attack loose, the shockwave alone being enough to destroy a lesser being. Naruto wasn't one of those being. He immediately dodged the attack by jumping atop the fox's extended fist, then proceeded to run up it. It took only a few seconds before he reached close to the fox's face. Kurama tried to use his other arm to swipe at Naruto as one would a bug, but Naruto once more dodged the fist and beeped his own back as he finally got close enough to Kurama's face. "Take this," said Naruto as he let his own fist fly. The impact could be felt all around as a shockwave was formed from the punch landing, cracking the ground in all directions and sending Kurama flying. Naruto landed on the ground with a smirk on his face. Kurama, however, was confused. How the hell had Naruto's punch had such an effect without him entering Sage mode? Oh, he knew Naruto was strong, but that was surprising. As the fox looked at the blonde, he began to notice something. Naruto had been out of the cloud of steam for a while now, but there was still steam around his body. It was then that Kurama finally understood what was going on. Naruto was using Kakuo's technique, the boil release. It was a technique that Naruto could use to enhance his strength by literally boiling his chakra, with the only limit to your strength being how much chakra you had. For someone like Naruto who had a shitload of chakra, that meant he could increase his strength exponentially. Kurama had almost forgotten that Naruto could now use the abilities of all of his siblings as well. "I see that you're putting those gifts you received to good use," said the fox who was actually quite proud. "Yeah, I figured since I have them I might as well use the, said Naruto who was still in a ready stance while Kurama was standing back up. "So, are you ready to continue?" he asked. "Of course I am. Don't get so full of yourself as to think that you can defeat me with a mere punch. It could very well be your downfall," said Kurama. With that the two once more gained serious expressions, both knowing that the other was about to get a bit more serious. "I would never dream of insulting you like that." With that final statement the two charged each other. Kurama decided to throw another punch, but this time Naruto didn't dodge. Instead he threw a punch of his own. When the fist of the two titans clashed, the shockwave it formed was massive. Kurama was pushed back slightly, having been prepared this time for Naruto's enhanced strength. Naruto, however, was flung back this time with incredible force. His body bounced across the ground a few times before he righted himself and landed on his feet while sliding back a bit still. Naruto knew that if they were in the real world, then Kuo would have been wiped off the map from the shockwaves alone. "It's good to see that you're taking this fight seriously," said Naruto, to which Kurama snorted. "You're the only human I know of that I would have to take seriously in a fight. The only one who can match me without those pathetic illusion or by absorbing my power," replied Kurama. Naruto once more smirked at the compliment. Almost a year ago Kurama would have never even dreamed of uttering that sentence, especially not to Naruto, but during and after the war, the fox had come to respect and trust the blonde. The two charged forward again and began throwing blows. This time, both combatants now accustomed to the other's strength. To anyone who would have seen this fight it would have appeared comical almost. The giant fox that eclipsed mountains, fighting a boy who was practically an ant in size comparison. The two then jumped apart and began charging their next attack. Kurama fired a beam of chakra from his mouth, which Naruto once more jumped to avoid. As soon as he landed he had to begin running to the left, with a beam of chakra following close behind. Naruto then leaped in the air once more and flung his own attack, the Rasen Shuriken. Kurama, seeing the attack coming, immediately ceased his own attack in order to dodge. He had an intimate knowledge on how powerful that attack was and had no intention of letting it hit him. He immediately charged up a tailed beast ball and fired it at the blonde. He didn't stop at one, though. He immediately began amassing, then releasing numerous attacks at Naruto. The blonde was working double time to make sure none of those attacks hit. Left, right, jump, duck. Those were just some of the thoughts going through Naruto's mind as he tried his best to dodge all of Kurama's attacks. Soon the volley of destruction came to an end. Naruto looked over at the fox who didn't even seem remotely winded, regardless of all of the powerful attacks he had been throwing around. "Wow, your strength still amazes the hell out of me," said Naruto. "Yeah, well you're about to be even more impressed," said the fox. With that the two rushed at each other once more, neither being distracted by any other thought except winning. Koneko was a normally stoic girl, never really speaking unless she had to or showing much emotions. She couldn't help the look of shock that was on her face at the moment, though. She had been in class, waiting patiently for the end of school bell to ring, when she had began to feel something. At first she didn't know what it was, but she soon was able to figure it out. It was chakra. Somebody nearby was using chakra, but it felt extremely weird when compared to what she was used to. This chakra felt almost warm and inviting. She didn't know who the culprit was, but she knew that she had to find them. That was why, as soon as the bell rang, she took off from her classroom. She immediately began following her senses, in hopes that it would lead her to what she was feeling. She quickly found herself drawn to the school roof. As she reached the door, she wasn't surprised to find it locked. With her strength that wasn't a problem. She instantly forced the door open and was surprised by what she saw. Sitting on a shaded part of the roof and the apparent source of chakra she was feeling was Naruto. While the amount of chakra he was releasing wasn't massive, it was still enough for Koneko to notice. She silently crept up behind the boy, more out of her natural way of moving than trying to sneak up on him. As she walked around to the front of him, she noticed that he appeared to be meditating. He didn't even seem to be reacting to her presence, which was a surprise since he always seemed so aware. How does he have chakra, and why does it feel so weird? Is he a Youkai, or is there something else going on? Wondered the girl to herself. The boy's chakra also felt extremely dense, but at the same time it put her mind at ease for some reason. She could practically feel how warm and safe it felt, and she couldn't help but want to get closer to it. Koneko, to her own surprise, soon found her body moving to sit right beside Naruto on the floor. She was taking in all of the warmth he was releasing, but it wasn't enough. She soon found her head leaning against him, and that's when the full comforting feeling of the chakra seemed to embrace her. For some reason she was feeling completely safe, like nothing in the world could touch her with the blonde around. She was also surprised that Naruto still didn't seem to be reacting to her presence at all, but she wouldn't complain. If Koneko was more aware as well, then she would have noticed when her cat features popped out for the world to see, but she too was lost in her own little world at the moment. He's so comfortable and so warm. Maybe I can stay like this for a few seconds without him noticing me, she thought to herself. Soon, however, the girl's eyes began to become heavy. Before she had even realized what had happened, she fell asleep, with her head now resting on Naruto's lap. It would be this moment that would help change the future of the young girl. It was after Koneko had fallen asleep that Naruto opened his eyes. He had sensed the girl, of course, but she didn't have any negative intent towards him, which was why he didn't react. Well, this is surprising, thought the blonde as he looked the sleeping girl over. Out of all of the things he had anticipated happening when she had come onto the roof, this wasn't even on the list. He then took a look into his shirt at the seal that was over his chest. This seal was what he used to keep his power hidden, but apparently his and Kurama's little spar was enough to bypass it. The chakra they were releasing was apparently too much for the seal to hide. He would have to work on it so that it could handle more power. What are you going to do with her? Asked the voice of Kurama. Nothing. She seems comfortable, and I'm not done kicking your ass yet, so I'll be here for a bit longer, was Naruto's reply. His goal with the seal he had placed on himself was not to hide the fact that he had chakra, but how much he had. It acted as a buffer which would keep his chakra levels at a mediocre level, but could be removed in less than a second with a single thought. He didn't really care if they knew he had chakra, nor was it his fault if they couldn't sense the little he was using. Oh really? So why don't you come back in here and back up that statement? Was Kurama's response to the challenge. They had both been fighting for a while inside the mindscape, but neither of them were even remotely tired or finished. I'll be right there. Kurama just grunted as he receded back into the mindscape to await his sparring partner. He hadn't had fun like this in months, so he would make sure that he enjoyed every minute that he could. With Naruto keeping a low profile in this world, he doubted that he would even get to see a fight between his host and anyone else, so this was probably the only time he'd have something to do. Naruto took these final moments to observe Koneko's new appendages once more. He actually thought that they suited her just fine. She's actually really cute like this, even more so than usual at least. With those final thoughts, Naruto delved back into his mind. One of the clones who hadn't dispelled yet found himself in an area of Japan known as Kyoto. The only thing that had brought the clone here was that he had felt an enormous source of power in the area. As the clone walked down the street, he couldn't help but notice that the power seemed to be coming from all over the place. He was silently wondering what it was, but he soon found himself being observed by someone. Of course, the clone had already changed its features. It now had brown hair that was straight, brown eyes, and was substantially shorter than he actually was. He was wearing what he had learned was called business attire, that being black pants and shoes with a red buttoned shirt. The clone continued to calmly walk down the street and observing its pursuers. As it reached an alleyway, it turned down it without hesitation. While the clone knew that its mission was finding Rainer, it also wanted to know what the strange energy was. He quickly tapped into his sage mode, but that seemed to be a bad idea. He was immediately surrounded on all sides by a diverse group of people. While the men and women surrounding him looked human, the clone could tell that they weren't. "Who are you, and why have you entered Kyoto?" asked one of the women, who seemed to be the one in charge. "I'm just a tourist taking in the sights. I wasn't aware that that was a crime," was the clone's response as he made sure to keep his senses up in case of an attack. "Oh really? Do you think that we're stupid? I don't know any of you well enough to say for sure." This answer from the clone just seemed to piss the group off. "Do you think that this is funny? Give me one reason why we shouldn't end you right now," asked another person from the group, this one a man. "Well, maybe because I haven't actually done anything to deserve it. Also, what the hell is it that you guys want anyway?" asked the clone in annoyance. He, like the original, didn't like being threatened. We want to know who the hell you are. Our sensors picked you up from miles away because of how much chakra you have, and now we learn that you also know sage arts. What is your purpose here? Asked the woman from before. This revelation shocked the clone. He wasn't aware that this world also had sage arts, though that should have been a given since they had chakra. He also didn't understand how they had detected him with his seal in place. Look, I'm not here for any trouble. I literally just came here to satisfy my own interest, but I have no plans of starting trouble. Said the clone, who was trying to defuse the situation. Oh really, and do you expect us to just believe you? Asked the woman. Naruto just sighed at this. You people seem to know what sage arts are, so I'm sure that you have some idea of what I can do. If I was here to start trouble, then don't you think I would have done so by now? Asked the clone while trying to show them reason. He also released his sage mode. The group began to look amongst themselves, clearly seeing the sense in his words. Before any of them could say anything, a new voice spoke up. Is that a threat on my home and people? It asked. Naruto turned around to get a look at the speaker, and his eyes widened because of what he saw. Standing before him was a very beautiful woman. She also had the largest amount of power out of everyone who he had sensed in Kyoto, and he knew when she had teleported behind him. She had long blonde hair, which was held in a ponytail, and yellow eyes. She wore a pair of red hakama pants with a ribbon of the same color tied around her waist, and a white kimono top with white socks and a pair of sandals on her feet. He heard many whispers of admiration and disbelief coming from the group around him. My lady, why are you here? Asked the leader of the group, which showed that the blonde woman was held in high regards. The woman who had just appeared was giving the clone a stern look and seemed ready to attack. No, it wasn't a threat. I was just pointing out what I would have been doing if I was one, especially after being surrounded. Said the clone, who was wondering who exactly this woman was. I see, and who exactly are you? Asked the woman. Don't you know that it's proper manners to introduce yourself first before asking the names of others? This caused the group around him to become even more pissed, but the woman just giggled and waved them off. Of course, how rude of me. My name is Yasaka. I'm a nine-tailed fox and leader of the Youkai faction of Kyoto. Started the woman with a slight bow. Now, who exactly are you? She inquired once more. This bit of knowledge caused the clone's eyes to widen. It was just his luck that he would run into someone like this, someone who was in a position of power, someone who he was trying to avoid. What else should he expect? He was also surprised that the woman before him was a nine-tailed fox, and he couldn't help but wonder how she would stack up to Kurama. He knew that the boss would love this info when he got it. Well, who I am isn't important, just know that I'm not here to cause any trouble. Said the clone, since he couldn't risk revealing the original's identity. He could instantly tell that neither Yasaka or any of the others present liked that answer. Now who's the one being rude? You seem to want me to trust you, yet you won't even divulge to me your name. How can I possibly trust you? Asked Yasaka. Look, in all honesty, the only reason I'm here is because I was passing by before I felt the energy that's running through this place. I just came here to try and find out what it was, but I'll leave if that's a problem. This just caused Yasaka to narrow her own eyes. And what interest do you have with the ley lines? Ley lines, huh? So that's what you call them. What exactly is their purpose? Asked the clone, who was receiving an incredulous look from Yasaka. Do you really expect me to answer your questions when you still haven't answered mine? She asked. Well, no, but I was hoping that you would. Arrest him. Said Yasaka, to which the group started moving in towards the clone. He wasn't worried though, being a clone and all. He also wasn't going to try and fight anyone, since he didn't need anyone looking for him. Okay, wait. How about I show you that I'm not here to start any trouble? Said the clone, who had just came up with an idea. And how do you plan on doing that? Asked Yasaka with a hint of curiosity. By bumping fists with you. Answered the clone as he held his fist out. He knew that this was probably a bad idea, but what the hell. He wouldn't show her any memories or personal stuff, just let her look in his heart to see he meant no harm. Yasaka, however, burst out in a fit of giggles. Do you really expect to gain my trust in such a juvenile manner? Yep, I do. Was the clone's impish response. Yasaka thought about it for a moment before she began to raise her own fist. She would humor the man for now, since he wasn't really acting hostile in any way. My lady, what if it's a trap? Asked one of the observers, which caused Yasaka to pause. What if this was some kind of trap? The man before her was quite calm for someone in his position. You're right, how do I know that this isn't a trap? Asked Yasaka as she pulled her hand back slightly. I have no reason to trick you, just as you have no real reason to think that I'm your enemy. Said the clone, who was still holding out his fist. It took Yasaka a second to decide before she bumped fists with him. Instantly she found herself in a world that was white, with what like shooting stars passing through it. Standing before her was the same man from the alley. Where are we? she asked in amazement. Right now you can say that we're in our hearts. Here there is no secrets and you can see the true nature of a person in here. Yasaka could immediately tell what he meant. She could literally see the type of person the man before her was. She could see that he was someone who strived for peace and always tried to resolve things in the most peaceful way possible that he could. She saw everything that was in his heart and she liked what she saw. The clone was also taking a look inside Yasaka's heart as well. He could see that she was a kind leader who did her best for her people. He also could feel a large part of her heart was taken up by someone, but he wouldn't try and see who. He was also glad that his transformation held up since he was showing her his heart, not his appearance. She still wouldn't know who he was, but at least she might decide to trust him and let him leave without violence. He could have dispersed, but that might have made Yasaka want to hunt him down. Add in that they had somehow been able to sense him, and he had no doubt that they might find the real him back in Kuo. While the experience felt like it lasted an eternity to Yasaka, in truth it was only a few seconds. When she opened her eyes back to the real world she just smiled at the man before her. It's fine, our guest is not a threat, said Yasaka to the surprise of the other Youkai. My lady, are you sure? He didn't do anything to you, did he? Asked the same woman who was the leader. Yasaka just looked at her and gave her a beatific smile as she responded. No, he didn't. All he did was show me the type of person he actually was and he's more than welcomed in Kyoto, as is my command. Instantly the other Youkai bowed their heads. They had just been given direct orders to leave the man alone, something that to disobey would amount to treason. As you wish. They all said as they immediately backed off. So, what now? Asked the clone in curiosity. Now, you will accompany me back to my home. Once there we can finish this conversation and hopefully both get some answers. The clone contemplated the answer before deciding to go along with the plan. But that she sent a look at the gathered Youkai, who immediately got the message. The group nodded at Yasaka and dispersed back onto the streets just as quickly as they had appeared. Sure, lead the way. The clone said after they were left alone, to which Yasaka giggled at. You really are quite an interesting person, aren't you? I guess you can say that, was the response as the two began walking. The clone walked in silence next to the smiling woman before he decided to ask a question. Hey, why don't you just teleport us to where we're going? I wish to enjoy the view of my city and share its beauty with you, unless you don't want to be seen with me, said Yasaka while looking like she was about to start crying at the end. Naruto frantically began to wave his hands in front of him. Of course not. I'm glad that I'll get to see such a beautiful city while spending time with a beautiful woman, he said while trying to stop the woman from crying. The mischievous smile he saw on her face was the immediate sign that he had been played. That's good to hear and thank you for the compliment, she said playfully. Naruto just rolled his eyes as he continued to follow the woman as she showed him the sights. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, another clone was also searching for any sign of Rainer. This clone was in an area known as the Vatican. He was looking for any signs of Rainer but had noticed something in the area. That curiosity, however, was how he found himself in his current predicament. Apparently the people who lived in the city really didn't like people sneaking around. Add in the fact that something seemed to have happened recently and it was a given that the natives were pissed. Bet him. Don't let him escape. Contact the higher-ups. We need more reinforcements. These were some of the shouts coming from the cloaked individuals that were chasing him through the city, though Naruto couldn't understand a single word. Luckily he had also followed orders and changed his appearance, or else he was sure that the original would have had some serious problems. What the hell is up with these guys? Questioned the clone to himself. He had been secretly going around the place and looking for any signs of Rainer when suddenly he was surrounded by a group of the cloaked individuals. They had immediately began questioning him, or at least it was the vibe that Naruto was getting from the situation. The clone, being who he was, decided to ask a question of his own. What the fuck are you people saying? Let's just say that a few of the people didn't like that question. Once it became obvious that these people might be willing to get hostile, the clone did what it thought was best. It took off running. While normally it would have just dispelled itself, it still wasn't finished canvassing the area for Rainer. Since it saw no point in another clone having to come and check things out, it decided to finish the job itself. And so began their game of cat and mouse. While the copy made it seem like he was just running in random directions to try and escape, he was in truth making sure that he searched every part of this place. And so the clone continued to run, and the exorcists continued to chase him. Finally the clone was finished with its reconnaissance and was about to dispel, but then it felt something behind him. He immediately ducked his head down and avoided being decapitated by a huge sword. Before he could get the chance to say anything he had to dodge another blade, this one being a katana. As he stood up straight again he took note of his two attackers. One of them was a girl with short blue hair with a green fringe and brown eyes, while the other had light brown hair and pigtails and violet eyes. The two of them were wearing matching uniforms, which was a black, sleeveless, skin-tight leotard with pauldrons, bicep-length fingerless gloves, and thigh-high boots, and adored with straps. Over all of this they wore white cloaks with blue and gold accents. There were a few other cosmetic differences between the two, like the blue-haired one was wearing a crucifix, but those were ignored for now. "Who are you, and what are you doing in this city?" asked a blue-haired one, who Naruto actually understood, as she held her sword out threateningly. Both of the girls seemed ready to attack at any moment. The clone also noticed that the rest of his pursuers had caught up to him. "I'm just visiting, trying to take in the sights and all that," replied the clone with a smile on its face. "Do you really expect us to believe your lies, sinner?" said the blue-haired one again. The clone just sighed as he turned around once he noticed that everyone around him looked ready to attack. "Look, I'm not here to cause any trouble. The fact that I'm standing here talking to any of you should be proof of that," he said. "Oh really, and why is that?" This time the question was asked by the brown-haired one. "Because I could just get away anytime I want, but you guys seem to think that I've done something." "What exactly am I being accused of?" asked the clone. "Don't play dumb, or act like we'll just let you get away," said Blue Hair. The clone sighed at this. He really needed to at least learn their names if he was going to continue this conversation. Before he could try and ask, the two girls moved. He found himself having to weave and dodge multiple sword slashes. "Hey, is this really necessary?" he asked as he was starting to get a bit annoyed. "We will not allow you to escape. We will capture you and find out what you did with the Excaliburs," shouted Pigtails. The clone just proceeded to roll his eyes at this. He soon got tired of the assault on his person. With lightning-fast speed he reached out and grabbed the katana-wielding girl by her wrist and twisted, causing her to scream out in pain as she dropped the sword she held in her grip. He then grabbed the sword out of the air and used it to block a sword swing from his other opponent. After block a few strikes he made his own. Using his superior strength he used his newly acquired blade to slam his opponent's own into the ground. He then rested his foot upon it to hold it in place and swung with the katana in his hand. The blue-haired girl, having no other choice, released her sword and jumped back to safety to avoid being decapitated. She sucked her teeth in anger as she watched him pick up her sword. Now he had both of their weapons, but something felt weird with them. The clone could feel something strange with these blades. "What's up with these swords?" asked the clone as he gave both blades a few test swings. The shocked looks on everyone's faces made him think that something was wrong. "He can wield a holy sword?" asked Blue with shock in her tone. "That's unbelievable," whispered her partner. While the clone would have liked to enjoy the amusing faces everyone was making for a bit more, he knew that he had already overstayed his welcome. With a sigh he threw both blades back to their respective owners. Their shocked looks just seemed to increase at this, like they couldn't understand the prospect of someone simply returning their weapons. "As I said earlier, I'm not here for any trouble," said the clone. But that he finally took it upon himself to dispel. He had caused enough of a commotion and still had to let the boss know that he hadn't found anything. He gave a final wave as he finally went up in a puff of smoke. "What the hell just happened?" asked the brown-haired girl after he had left, trying to find some reason for what had transpired. "I don't know," started her partner as she began to take on a serious tone. "But when I find whoever that guy was, I'll make sure to get my answers," she finished. With that all of the exorcists went in to report what had happened. Rias Gremory was annoyed. It was an hour after school and Koneko still hadn't come to the clubroom so that they could have their meeting and go on their contracts. She could tell that the girl was still at school, but she didn't seem to be moving. This fact also made Rias a bit worried since Koneko was never one to just skip out on work or anything like that. It was for this reason the Rias, along with the remaining members of her peerage, were headed towards where Koneko was. It didn't take them long to reach their destination, which seemed to be the school roof. They all looked to her for her orders as they reached the door leading to the roof. With a simple nod Kiba proceeded to silently open the door open. Once it was opened, everyone immediately rushed out onto the roof, each one prepared to attack or defend if necessary. What they saw however, was definitely not something that they were prepared for. Each of them bore a shocked look as they saw Koneko laying on the roof with her head in Naruto's lap. Add in the fact that her Nekashu features were out on full display for anyone to see. "What the hell is going on here?" whispered Rias in shock. "I think that Koneko is sleeping and I'm meditating," was the reply from Naruto, which caught the devils off guard. "Oh my, how cute," said Akeno with a smile on her face. "I can't believe that she just fell asleep on your lap," said Kiba, who knew how Koneko usually was around people outside of their group. "Yeah, I was actually surprised too. This was just as much of a surprise for me as it is for all of you," said Naruto quietly as he was trying to not wake Koneko. I thought that you didn't like me or my peerage," inquired Rias, who would never admit that she was a little jealous. Somehow Koneko had managed to get closer to Naruto than anyone else in her peerage had, and she was the most antisocial one. "I never said that I don't like you, I just don't like the systems you use," said Naruto, seriously. "Sona uses the exact same system, but you still treat her way better than you do me," said Rias with a bit of anger. To her Naruto was sounding like a hypocrite right now, condemning her while accepting Sona, even though they were both doing the same thing. "Well, it's true that you both use the same system, it's also true that you both use them in different ways. Well, you have gained your peerage by force, even if it wasn't you doing the forcing, Sona has gained her peerage by their own choice," said Naruto. That was the reason that he could accept Sona more. She didn't force the members of her peerage to join, they had each chosen to. They each had gotten all of the details of what their choice entitled and had chosen it for themselves. That was not slavery, that was practically indentured servitude. They had chosen to give their life away to serve Sona by choice, unlike Ria's peerage. He just couldn't get behind someone who took away others' choices. "None of those were my fault. I saved most of their lives by allowing them into my peerage, can't you see that?" asked Rias, who honestly felt like she was about to start crying. She didn't like being seen as the bad guy, especially when she did what she had for the right reasons. Why couldn't she get him to see that and not see her as someone who took people's choices away? She knew what it was like to have your choice taken from you and not knowing what others had planned for you. That's why she made sure to treat her peerage like family and not just like pieces of property. "I'm sure that whatever happened in the past wasn't your fault, but I just don't like people who take away others' choices. I believe that everyone should be allowed to make their own decisions, but none of your peerage really had that option," said Naruto. He then began to pick up Koneko off of his lap as he stood up. He then sighed as he saw the look on Ria's face. He really didn't hate her or anything, just a broken system that she benefited from. "Look, Rias, I don't think that you're a bad person, but I also like people to have free choice," he said as Rias looked away from him with a sad look adorning her face. "Look, Naruto, the president really was the best thing that happened to us. Without her, we honestly don't know where any of us would be, though the most likely option is dead," said Kiba. "He's right. The president saved each of us and we don't hold her choice of turning us into devils against her. Well, the choice might not have been ours to make, we are glad that it was made," said Akeno with a sincere smile. Naruto once more sighed as he looked at Rias, who was giving him a slightly hopeful look. He knew that he was being hard on Rias, but that didn't mean she was bad. "Look, I've already agreed to hear Akeno out. From there we'll see where things go," he said. The happy look that spread over Ria's face was all he saw next as she rushed him and gave him a hug, which was a bit awkward since he was carrying Koneko. The Redeed quickly caught herself and released Naruto while clearing her throat. "I'm sorry for my outburst, it won't happen again," said Rias with a small bow as an apology. Naruto just shook his head. "It's okay. Is there any place that I can put her?" asked Naruto while gesturing to the still slumbering form of Koneko. "We can take her back to the club room, but we'll have to make sure that nobody sees her," was Ria's reply as she gestured to the other girls' cat features that were still on display. "Why don't you all just teleport there?" asked Naruto. "Because I was hoping that you would join us, if you want to of course," said Rias, who was once more giving Naruto a hopeful look. While she knew that they hadn't gotten through all of their problems, she knew they had made some progress. Naruto thought about the choice that was given to him. He knew that he wouldn't be able to focus on studying if he went back to Sona due to the current situation, but did he want to hang out with Rias? Well, it was probably a good idea not to. He also knew that he still needed some type of distraction. With another sigh he gave his answer. "Fine, I'll come, but only if Akeno makes some snacks since I haven't really eaten anything all day." Akeno immediately began clapping while jumping in place due to excitement, a sight Naruto tried to ignore for certain reasons. "Of course I'd be glad to make something for you. Do you have any requests?" she asked excitedly. Naruto thought about it for a few seconds. "Can you make ramen?" he asked, slightly hopeful. The smile that he received was answer enough for his question. With that, the group of 5 began to sneakily make their way back to the club room. As Naruto made his way with Rias and her group, he couldn't help but once more wonder if this was a bad idea. "I gave Sona a chance, why not Rias?" he wondered to himself. Well, he would never support their system, he figured maybe he could use this situation to do some good. He would also make sure that Rias put in actual work to get him to be more amicable with her. He wouldn't make the poor girl beg or grovel at his boot, but he wouldn't just accept her and let her think that he was okay with what she was doing. But that he continued to follow the devils, while making sure that Koneko's extra features remained hidden from any possible prying eyes. He soon received the memory of another clone and had to wonder to himself, what the fuck is an Excalibur? In an undisclosed area there was an abandoned looking building. And in that building was a figure that was chained up while being fully naked and placed in a cell. That figure was the missing Rainer who had been presumably kidnapped by Kakabiel. If anyone saw the state that the poor girl was in, it would be obvious that she was being tortured. She had skin and nails peeled off, bruises and lacerations all over her body, and was missing her left wing entirely. Even some of her teeth were missing, and she was laying in a pool of her own blood and excrement. She was shivering due to the cold and looked like she hadn't eaten or had anything to drink in a while. She immediately bolted up when she heard the cell door open. She looked to see the person who had been torturing her since she was taken, the man known as Fried Selzen. He had been ordered by Kakabiel to do the deed until Rainer agreed to finish carrying out the plan. The reason for this, apparently, was because someone had appeared in Kuo a few months ago, someone powerful. That was the reason that Kakabiel had contacted her in the first place when he found out where she was going for her mission. He had sweet-talked her into helping him by killing anyone in Kuo that might be a risk, which was a big part of why she was planning on killing Issei. She might not know which sacred gear he held, but each one was dangerous in their own right. But she had to go and be persuaded by that blonde bitch just because she was stronger. Now look at her, abused and humiliated. At least Fried hadn't tried to do anything sexual to her, with him viewing her as filth. She looked up at the demented man who was standing over her. "Have you changed your mind about the boss's plan yet?" he asked with his sick grin on his face. It didn't take any consideration from Rainer for her answer. "Yes, I'll head back to Kuo and take out anyone that might be a threat. Just let me go, and I promise I won't fail," she pleaded. Fried seemed to nod in acceptance as his smile grew. "Good, that's all I needed to hear," he said as he removed the shackles from her wrist and walked out of the cell. "Oh, don't forget to take out the blonde bitch that tried to turn you to her side also," he said. They had gotten all of the info they could out of Rainer, so they now knew what had made her change her mind all of a sudden. They just had to remind her who the real threat was and why you should always follow orders. Rainer just continued to sit there in her cell as she began contemplating what she would be doing tomorrow. The first thing she'd have to do is take out the pervert, so maybe she should get her phone and give him a call to meet her. From there she'd have to find a way to take care of her other problem. Maybe Kalawarner and the others might be able to help her, or maybe they'd all just die trying. She knew that she was probably dead either way, she just didn't know if she should take everyone else with her. But the final thought, she got up and exited the cell. She had a lot of things to do, but she couldn't allow herself to be dissuaded again. She would finish her mission this time, no matter what. Chapter end. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video, peace out.